will go on Google Classroom so that you can, if you miss a day, you can keep caught up. So say you got sick or something and you missed like 5 days in a row, you wouldn't have to lose all 5 days. You could watch these videos every day. And I just record them as I'm doing them. So it's not the best quality, but hey, it's better than nothing, right? And being stuck at home alone. So today we're gonna do surface area. Does anyone remember what surface area actually is?
How big the square is.
Yeah, like how big the square is, how big something is, right? In this case, squares, because that's what we have is squares. I like to describe it usually as like how much it takes to cover something. So if I wanted to cover that wall with green paper, like how much paper would I need? How much square footage is usually what we call it. So it's like how big something is or how much to cover something. I like your description, how big a surface is. I say surface instead of square just because it could be for anything. Typically, when we talk about surface area, you'll hear it when you talk about houses, right? So if you go and you start looking for apartments or a house to move out into one day, they're going to be like, what's the square footage of that house? That means how big is it? Like how much walking space is there through the whole house? And obviously, the bigger the number, the bigger the house. So that's what we're going to do today. The bigger the price. Yeah, they usually charge you per like $100 per square foot or something like that. I think there's some sort of deal that they've made to price out their thing. We'll start with squares. We'll start with just counting it so we can actually see what it kind of looks like. So if you look at this first question, if I asked you what's the surface area of that first square, you could literally count it out. Like how many blocks is it? Is it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9? Yep. So counting it, it's just 9. And when it's literally labeled like that, that's how you could do it, which is kind of nice. Mathematically, so if they didn't give you all those little individual squares, we do something called length times width, right? So you do one side times the other side. So if you're looking at this square, one side length from here to here is 3 long. I knew what you meant. Yeah, so one side is 3, and then the next side right beside it is also 3. So if mathematically, the way we would calculate it is 3 times 3, which if you put in your calculator, it equals 9. It should always be the same, right? Notice that for rectangles or squares, we're doing the sides that come together. So it's like this top side, and then one of the sides that's right next to it. I wouldn't do 3 times whatever's on the opposite end of it, because that's no longer length times width, that's length times length. Your times about the same thing. All right, let's look at the second one. If we're just counting it out, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 blocks there. So we know the answer should be 16. Mathematically, the way we do it is we're going to do length. The length is 4 times width, which is right next to it, also 4. 4 times 4 is 16. Beauty. The last one. You might have already worked ahead of me a little bit. So if you're looking at it, if you count the blocks, there's 25 of them there. Right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25 blocks total. If you want to do it more mathematically or algebraically, you would do length 5, width 5. Algebraically, yeah, it just means like math. We won't have many questions anymore where you get to do the counting. Like this, being able to count the blocks, not really going to happen anymore. Basically, it's always going to be length times width. Cool. Our formula for a rectangle or a square, I always just call them all rectangles. Squares are like special rectangles. They're just the same, right? Area equals length times width. I usually write it like this. A equals L times W. Usually I don't make my W so messy, but hey. It's day like 3, all right? Like, give me a break here.
Let you find your form.
Yeah, all right. I can't remember how to make my letters. Cool, so we got a couple examples down there. What is the surface area of each square? So if we look at A, we have no squares in the middle, so we can't count it. So we have to do our length times width. Our length on this guy, we have 9. The width is also 9. So we have 9 times 9 for an answer of 81. Beautiful. If you look at the next square over, you'll notice they only gave you one side length. They didn't give you the other side lengths. We know this is a square though, right? The question said calculate a square. So they're all the same. Yeah. So I know that right next to it, this is also 7.2. This is also 7.2. This is also 7.2.
Isn't that what the lines mean too?
Yep. And that's what these little symbols mean. So if there's a line through a line like that, a line through a side like that, it means any other side that has that line is the exact same length. So these are all 7.2. To do area, it's length times width. So 7.2 times 7.2. Sometimes people will do 7.2 times 7.2 times 7.2 times 7.2 because there's 4 sides, right? But you only have to do one length, one width, then you're good. If you throw that in your calculator, I don't know what you get. 7.2 is a hard number. 51.84. Awesome. So those are the correct numbers. Now let's take a second just to talk about the units. So if I asked you like, hey, what's the surface area of that square? And you said 81, I don't know if that's 81 millimeters, which is really small, or that's 81 kilometers, right? Like that could be massive. So you always have to check what the units are. In this first question, our units were millimeters. So you would have to put your answer as millimeters. But because it's area, we say millimeters squared. So you put a little 2 above it like that. What that means is you could fit 81 little millimeter blocks in here. 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter, so little tiny millimeter blocks. You should be able to fit 81 in there. The second one would be centimeters squared. Like that.
Fit 51 bigger blocks.
Yeah, 51 centimeter blocks, which are way bigger than a millimeter box, right? And when you talk about houses, they always talk about square feet. A foot is 12 inches, right? So it's the size of a ruler. So if they say it's 1,000 square foot home, that means there's 1,000 1 by 1 blocks, like foot by foot, which seems like a lot. If you go to a house, a lot of houses have, you like have square tiling or something like that. Usually those square tiles are either 1 by 1 or 2 by 2, and you can count how big your house is just by looking at the blocks. So you'd be like, oh, the square footage of this house just by counting the blocks.
We should measure the blocks.
We should. We could probably do it with the blocks on the walls, right? Like each block is probably 1.5 feet long or something like that. We could probably do it. Some of them are cut in half though, yeah.
Yeah, they're put in uneven.
Wouldn't work too good.
Just get a big measuring tape.
Yeah, massive one. Okay, we got a couple more questions there. Rectangle, so it's still the same thing though, right? Length times width. So if we're looking at this first one, we want to know the area of that. It would be length of 8 times width of 17. Numbers are too big for me, so we're going to do 8 times 17 in our calculator to get 136 centimeters squared. And I like to always put a little box around my answer so I know where it is. The very last one, we've got 10.3 times 4.5 equals, and again, too hard for me, 46.35. centimeters squared. Awesome. How do you feel about surface area? Feel like remembering a little bit? Beautiful. I'm going to give you guys a practice sheet right now so you can practice. There's like 6 more questions. Answers are on the back of the sheet if you want to check out your answer. But just so we can practice it and remember it, right? And it's kind of the best. Woo! Rectangles are nice and easy. They're the easiest ones. The reason we're reviewing these things is because when we do 3D shapes, because that's what we're going to do, 3D shapes always break down into basic shapes. Right? So I can take an object and break it apart to be triangles, rectangles, circles. So if you can do these, you should be able to do a 3D shape as long as you can break it apart proper. Anyone remember how to find the surface area of a triangle?
Isn't it length times width divided by 2?
Yeah, it is. We use, instead of length times width,
Base
times height, but it's the same thing, right? Like if I was looking at this triangle, like I could call this length here and width here. But typically with a triangle, because it's not always a nice right triangle, we have to call it base. And we have to call it height. So our formula for a triangle is base
Why do you divide it by 2?
times height divided by 2. I'll show you.
Half a square.
Yeah, that's actually exactly what it is. I'm going to do it with just letters, so B times H divided by 2. Yeah, and the reason why is because a triangle is always just half of a square. So if you looked at that, I could finish off this square by going up like that, across like that. And now I have a square.
What about if it's like an up?
So then if it's like this, because these are the ones that are always hard to imagine, right? If you had something like this, that's one of those ones where base times height's hard, right? Because it's like, that's not half a square. Why am I dividing that by 2? But it is half a square. If you took half the triangle and put it right here, you took the other half and put it right here.
So it's like 2 halves.
Yeah, so they've taken that triangle, they've split it here and here to create that square or that rectangle. Kind of cool, right? And some of the ones like this one down here, like that one on the right, things like that are really tricky to try to see how it's only half a triangle, but it is. It's half in there somewhere. Cool, so now we have our formula. Let's try a couple questions. My issue with triangle is always which side's the base, because sometimes it's not obvious. This one's a little bit more obvious because it's nice flat like that, but it's not always obvious. So when you're looking for it, I like to try to find the height first. And the height has to be from one of the peaks, see that's a peak, and then straight down to a side length. So 6 is my height.
Is the height always dotted?
It should. It'll always be like that line that's kind of cutting through somewhere. If I can figure out where the height is, it'll connect to the base. So for instance, this one connects straight down to this line right there. So that means my base is 10. The height's usually easier to pick out. The base is sometimes tricky because they give you all those side lengths, right? So for us, on this question, it would be 6, base times height. So we'll do base first. 10 times 6 divided by 2. You put that in your calculator, you should get 30. And once again, we have to do our units. So everything was measured in meters. So it's meters squared.
Would you have divided by 2?
I did, I think. So if you go 10 times 6, you get 60. And then 60 divided by 2 will be 30. Try it in your calculator now. So go 10 times 6. That's a problem also with using your phone as a calculator is sometimes it's going to do weird things. It'll divide like every number by 2. It'll do all kinds of weird stuff.
Yeah, because I got 15. So once I divide.
Yeah, so divided by 2 an extra time. Yeah, it probably divided the 10 by 2 and the 6 by 2, which would divide it twice by 2. Okay, so we're looking at B. I'm going to try to find the height first. The height should always be connecting to a peak. There's a peak with a line that's connecting to it. I would say that the height is 5. That's a weird one, right? But it has to come out of a corner and then kind of be straight down somewhere. So height equals 5. The base in this case is connecting to that bottom line, which is only 5. They've extended it a little bit, right? Just to be able to get out there for the height. But the base is only 5.
Wouldn't the lowest number always be the base?
Not always. So if you took this same triangle, like the one on the left, and I'm going to try to draw it the same, but good luck for that, hey? So they could give you like 10, 7, 8, the same sides, but they could make your height right here. And they could say, oh, that height is 9. And now my height would be 9, but my base would become 7. Trippy, right?
Yeah.
That's why you always got to figure out where that height is connecting to so that we can use that as our base. Ones like that are always really trippy. So for this, we got 5 height times base, or base times height, and then divide by 2. Should give you 12.5, and that's IN means inches. You can just put IN. I'm just going to write inches so you know it's inches squared. So that's the area of that triangle. Cool. You can practice your. To be able to find the area of a circle, there's 2 different measurements that you're going to get. Yeah.
Well, when you're like trying to find the surface area, it's pi times r squared.
Yes.
If
So
it's showing the diameter, you do half of that to get the radius.
perfect. So he nailed it. So he's talking about 2 different things: diameter and radius, right? So diameter is one edge of the circle to the other edge of the circle, but it has to go through the middle. Pardon?
That's rim to rim.
Rim to rim, yeah, rim to rim, but it has to go through the middle, right? So like rim to rim from here to here would not be diameter because it didn't go through the middle.
That's a tangent. Isn't it?
Close, but it is called something.
Oh, no.
Tangent means it only touches the edge once.
Oh, yeah.
So tangent would be like this.
I'm pretty sure how blurry the screen is now.
Yeah, mine just went super blurry too. I think it's just the internet.
I was like, I swear those weren't clear.
Yeah, it's just the internet. You didn't
It's
lose
like
your
it's all over
eyesight.
glasses for the computer.
That's weird.
Diameter.
So diameter is, yeah, rim to rim, but it has to go through the middle. And then radius is half of that, so just rim to the middle.
What's not going to do in this? What if it's rim to rim?
What is that called?
What?
If it's just rim to rim, it doesn't go through the middle. It does have a name.
When it goes all the
I
way
remember
around.
learning the name, but I didn't pay
Oh,
attention.
I
to
know,
it.
and I taught it last week. Tangent lines on the outside, it only touches the
Why don't we
circle
just
once.
give it a name like Terry?
Yeah, Bob. If it goes from rim to rim, it does touch the middle. It's a bob line.
Yeah.
A bob line. Oh, it has a name. That's grade 9 math.
Don't worry. So it's serious question. What's the line that goes in the middle? But
Sorry.
Figure that out.
Back to this. Yeah, diameter, just so you can write it down in case you didn't get it, is all the way across. Radius is halfway. And you have to use the radius, right? Our formula is always radius squared. So if they give you the diameter, then you have to cut that number in half. Right? I'm going to say radius equals diameter divided by 2. If you guys remember that, like then the formula is pretty straightforward, right? The area is just equal to pi r squared. If you want to do 3.14,
I cannot make a pi symbol or say.
Me either, man. And I've been teaching math for like 6 years. I can't do a pi symbol. I try my best. It's like a line and I try to connect it.
Two weird lines and then a wiggle.
Yeah, I try. If you want to use 3.14 instead of pi, so be it. That's fine. I'll make it work for you. I'm not going to stress too much about rounding or being one decimal place off, at least not in this unit, maybe in future units. R squared, just for the record, this right here, that means that there's two R's. It's the number times itself. So this is really the same thing as saying R times R. It's not R times 2, right? And that's what people always put in their calculator. They go R times 2. It's not that.
I think that's what
Two R's. Yeah, and that throws people off, right? So let's try number 6. So what's the surface area? Area of a circle equals pi times r squared. So for us, that would be pi times 7 squared. Or 49. Like if you know that 7 squared is 49, you're more than welcome to just put 49 there. I'm always going to write it like that. If you put that in your calculator, especially with these ones, you're almost always going to have to.
If I got this wrong, I have no idea what I did.
153.9?
If you round, it's 0.9. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm rounding it. Yeah. You'll notice with the circles, I'm always just going to do the first decimal. And again, it's centimeters squared. So make sure you're putting units, right? It is going to matter. If you look at B, they didn't give you the radius, they gave you the diameter. That's the full thing. So what you need to figure out is what just half of it is. Yeah, and it's 1.5. If you weren't sure, 3 divided by 2 is 1.5. Right? Cut it in half, and that'll give you your radius. We can then calculate it. So pi r squared, 1.5 squared.
Wouldn't that be just 3 then?
No, 1.5 times 1.5 is going to be something weird. It's 2.25. Yeah. And then times pi. 7.06, so it'd be 7.1 meters squared.
Do we have to round?
Yeah. Try your best round. If you put 7.0, honestly, I'd probably give it to you. But try to round your best. So that was 7.06, right? Anything that's 5 or bigger rounds the other number up. So it becomes 7.1. Your last one. We've got 50 centimeters there, and that is the radius. So we're going to go pi times 50 squared. 50 squared is 2,500. Then times that by pi. You get 7,853 point. Oh gosh, it's 98. So that means the 8 would make the 9 round up. The number after 9 is 0, which makes the next one round up as well. So this is 7,854.0. All right, so if we're rounding, this 8 would make the 9 round up. Because the next number is 0, that makes the next one round up as well. It's like a double bump.
I got 7, 8.
You got 7,850?
Yeah.
Did you use 3.14?
Maybe I just put it in.
Nope, that's what happens if you get 3.14. That's why they're using all the digits in pi. So he actually got 7,850 by not using all the digits of pi. So it does make a difference. Right? So make sure you're using pi if you're doing it on a test or something like that. Cool. There's 3 questions right there. I want you to try them right now. It's the last 3 on that page, and then I'll go through them. So make sure you're doing the rectangles, the triangles, and the circles all correctly, and then you can finish off your practice booklet. But try those 3 on your own. Let's see if you got these 3 right. So that example 7a, that's a good example of one people get wrong just because there's so many numbers and they choose the wrong numbers to multiply together, right? So it is a rectangle, so we know it's going to be length times width. 32 will call you can call it the width or the length. It doesn't matter as long as you know to pick the other side and not the opposite from it. So I'm going to say this is my length. That means the width is right beside it, and I chose that one as my width. Technically, that's also a width if we want it to be. Okay, this is also a length. So as long as you just understand, like these two are the same, don't multiply them together. Because that's length times length, not length times width. And don't multiply these two together because that's width times width, not length times width. You guys have been doing this for so long, you're probably better at it than I am. So 32 times 20, 640, I think. And it's meters squared. You gotta twist it. Awesome. For B, it's a triangle. Triangle is base times height divided by 2. The base is 5.2. The height is 4.2. And then divide by 2. I need a calculator for that. So 5.2 times 4.2 and then divided by 2, you get 10.92. That one didn't have units, so we'll just leave it as 10.92. And the circle, this is something that you might know what it means. That is a unit right there. You didn't know what those two little symbols mean?
Inches?
Yeah, that's inches. I think.
I know because when you're like writing like feet, you do like
Yeah,
5'1".
yeah. Yeah. That's a good thing to know because people do write those little double dots on things all the time, like medical things or something like that. You're 5'6", right? So it'd be 5. One means one little line is in feet, and then 6, and then 2 inches. So 5 foot 6 inches. So that's 8 inches. That's a diameter, right? That's not a radius. So you got to cut that thing in half to figure out that the radius was only 4 inches. So you should add pi times 4 squared. If you put that in your calculator, you should have got 50.3 inches squared. Cool. Places where you see surface area, you see it a lot with talking about painting walls, right? They'll say this can of paint can cover 100 square feet of a wall. You'll see it if you're trying to frame something. They'll say, like, what's the size of your picture? And they'll usually ask you surface area, but they'll give you the length and the width as well. I think the only place I see it a lot is houses. I like it's always there. Square footage is telling you the surface area of the floors to tell you where to go. Can you think of anywhere else where you see it a lot?
Painting walls.
Painting walls is the biggest one. So when I wanted to paint that wall, I need to get a can of paint that could cover that surface area. So I had to figure out the surface area of the wall and say it's 200 square feet. And then I had to go find a can of paint that said it would cover 200 square feet. That's basically the most.
Fertilizer on your lawn. How much?
Oh, that's a good
How
one.
much
Yeah.
coverage you
Yeah, or even just like laying your sod if you're like putting sod into a new lawn. Yeah, seed, fertilizer, anything else. Fencing would be like linear footage, like your perimeter around it. It's kind of everywhere. It's just hidden, right? If you think about it. Cool. That's